He just wanted peace, a quiet home on a distant planet. But what he got was a mysterious fox girl as his roommate. She barely spoke, never smiled, and watched him like he was a puzzle. At night, strange things happened. Doors moved, shoes shifted. His back itched with something growing under the skin. Then one night, she walked in on him, changing his shirt. Her eyes went wide, her breath caught, and she whispered, "What? You're one of them." She wasn't scared of him. She was scared of what he was becoming. A hidden truth was waking in his blood. A tale not just made of fur, but of legend, prophecy, and danger. Now both of them are being hunted. Because, if the wrong ones find out, the last talebearer could burn worlds or save them. Only she knows which, and only he can decide what happens next. Now, let us go to the place where dust, sacrifice, and destiny first collided, where the story truly begins. Jake didn't like noise. That's why he moved to this quiet town on the edge of the galaxy. A small blue planet, not too crowded, with calm nights and empty skies. He needed peace after everything he'd been through. The war, the loss, the noise. Now, he just wanted silence. A job he could do quietly, and a place where no one would bother him. The house they gave him was strange though. It stood alone in the middle of tall red grass. Surrounded by whispering trees, the walls were made of smooth stone and the windows were too clean. It felt watched. Still, Jake didn't care. He dropped his bag, took off his boots, and let out a deep breath. It was his now, and he was finally alone. That's when the door creaked open behind him, and a soft voice said, "You're early." He turned around fast, surprised. In the doorway stood a girl, not human, but close. She had long silver hair, two pointed fox-like ears on top of her head, and a tail that swayed behind her slowly. She wore a dark robe, no shoes, and her eyes were deep orange, glowing faintly in the dim light. "I thought the human wouldn't arrive until next week," she said softly, looking at him, but not quite meeting his eyes. Jake blinked. Sorry. They told me this place was empty." "It's not," she said simply. Then turned and walked away, her tail disappearing down the hallway. Later that night, Jake found a note in the kitchen. House agreement, due to space shortage. Alien exchange program roommate, assigned species, Vulpiri. Name, Shira. Below it was a list of rules. The last one underlined, do not enter her room, especially at night. Jake sighed, drank some water, and looked around. So much for being alone. The next few days were strange. Shira barely spoke. She moved silently through the house, always barefoot, always hooded, always avoiding him. She never used the couch, never turned on lights, and always opened windows, even in the cold. Sometimes she sat on the rooftop for hours, just staring at the stars, tail wrapped around her knees. Jake tried to be polite. He said good morning. She nodded. He said, "Need anything from the store?" She shook her head. She never smiled, never asked questions. It was like living with a ghost, but a ghost with glowing eyes and sharp ears. One night, he woke up to a sound, scratching, very soft, but right outside his door. He sat up, heart racing, listening. The scratching stopped, replaced by quick footsteps, then silence. He got out of bed, opened the door slowly. The hallway was dark, but empty. He checked the lock on the front door, still sealed. Maybe a dream, maybe not, but something felt off. The next morning, Jake found a bowl of soup on the kitchen table, hot, steaming, and with a strange herbal smell. A small note next to it said, "For energy," in neat alien script, translated into English below. He looked around, but Shira was nowhere to be seen. He sipped it, bitter, warm, not bad, that night. He slept deeper than usual, so deep he didn't wake when his door opened again outside his room. Shira crouched by the doorway, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. She watched him breathe, head tilted like an animal studying something new. She whispered something in her own language, then turned and vanished into the shadows, silent as always. Jake woke the next morning feeling strangely fresh, as if he hadn't just moved planets. But when he looked in the mirror, he saw something weird. A faint mark on his back, like a scratch that healed too quickly, and the feeling like someone had touched his spine gently in the night. He brushed it off, dressed, and went to make coffee in the hallway. He passed Shira. She paused, stared at him longer than usual, then whispered, "You smell different." Jake blinked. "What do you mean?" But she was already gone, her tail sliding around the corner. And for the first time since he moved in, Jake felt like he was the one being studied, not the other way around. The days passed slowly. Jake got used to the quiet, but not to Shira. She moved like a shadow in the house, soft steps, no sound. She came and went without warning. Always watching him from a distance, she never touched him, never got too close, but sometimes he could feel her eyes on his back. One night he left his room to get water. He passed the hallway and saw her standing still near his door. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at the door with her glowing orange eyes. "Shira?" he asked quietly. She looked at him slowly, blinked once, then walked away without a word. He didn't sleep well that night. The next morning, something was different. His blanket was tucked in tighter than usual, and the pillow had moved. He never made his bed that neatly. Jake stared at it for a long time, heart beating slowly. Was she coming into his room at night? He tried to ignore the feeling, but it only got worse. Each night, he placed his shoes just inside the door in a special way. One pointing left, one right. Every morning, they were turned straight, side by side, neatly placed like someone didn't want him to trip. Who would do that? One night, he placed a tiny glass bell near the edge of his shelf. It would fall if someone touched it. He made sure it was just barely balanced. Then he turned off the lights, closed his eyes, and pretended to sleep. The room stayed dark and silent. Minutes passed, then an hour. Jake kept breathing slow, eyes closed, body still. Then he heard the door creak open, just slightly. Soft feet on the carpet, a warm breath near his face. He fought the urge to open his eyes. She was in his room. A hand gently touched his back, fingers moving slowly. They found the mark near his spine, the small bump that wasn't there a month ago. She touched it lightly, then pulled her hand back with a soft gasp, a whisper, too quiet to understand. Then the door closed again, and the room returned to silence. Jake waited a minute, then sat up and looked at the shelf. The bell was gone. He looked under the bed and found it, gently placed on the floor, unbroken. She had moved it carefully, without sound. The next day, he waited for her in the kitchen. She entered quietly, as always, her hood covering most of her face. But today, she looked nervous. "Were you in my room last night?" Kay asked. She didn't answer, but her tail twitched behind her, fast and sharp. "You touched my back," he said, "didn't you?" Still no answer, but her glowing eyes looked up at him now, and they were filled with something strange. Fear, curiosity, maybe even guilt. "Shira, what's going on?" he asked again. Softer this time, she opened her mouth slightly, then closed it again. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, "You have it?" "Have what?" Jake asked, but she was already turning away, walking fast, almost running, that evening. He heard her muttering to herself in the alien language. She sat on the rooftop under the stars, speaking quickly. Words he didn't understand, but one word came up over and over again. Tailbearer. He looked it up on the planetary translator. No results. Just a warning. Term classified under restricted cultural data. That night, Jake locked his door for the first time, but even then, he heard footsteps stop just outside it. A pause, a soft breath. Then silence again, in the dark. He whispered to himself, "What do you see in me, Shira?" He didn't know, but the way she looked at him was changing. No longer confused or annoyed. Now, it felt like she was afraid. Not of him, but of what he might become. Jake was tired of being watched. He didn't mind quiet, but this was something else. Shira wasn't just shy. She was studying him like he was dangerous or special. She barely ate, barely spoke, but her eyes followed him everywhere. So one evening, after a long jog, he stayed in his room to cool down. He took off his sweaty shirt, threw it aside, and stood in front of the mirror. His skin was damp, muscles sore. But that strange bump on his lower back was getting bigger. It wasn't a scar, it wasn't a bruise. It almost looked like something was trying to grow out of him. He reached back and touched it. It twitched under his fingers, like a muscle or a nerve. It didn't hurt, but it didn't feel normal either. Just then, the door creaked. Shira. He called without thinking. Turning around quickly, she was standing in the doorway, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. She had never entered his room without knocking before, but now she stood frozen, staring at the bump on his back, exposed and bare. Her face turned pale, ears stiffened, tail puffed out. You're... she whispered, voice shaking. Jake grabbed his shirt, confused. What? What is it? She stepped back, like he had struck her. You're one of them, she said in a trembling voice. You weren't supposed to survive. One of who? Jake demanded, walking toward her, but she backed up fast. Her claws came out, actual claws from her fingertips, gleaming faintly under the hallway light. Stay back, she warned, her voice full of panic. Don't touch me, Shira. I don't understand, he said calmly, hands raised. It's just a mark. She shook her head. Tears in her glowing eyes. No, it's not. That's not a mark. It's a tail. A buried tail. Jake blinked. That's impossible. I'm human. She looked like she wanted to scream, but instead she turned and ran fast. Faster than anything he'd ever seen. Her tail vanished around the hallway corner, and the front door slammed shut. He ran after her. But by the time he stepped outside, she was gone. Vanished into the trees, into the red grass beyond the property. The night fell quiet again, but it wasn't peaceful anymore. It felt like everything had changed. He stayed up that night waiting for her. Nothing. No lights, no sounds, just the cold wind and the stars above. In the morning, he found her bag near the front door. She had packed in a hurry, a blanket, food, an old tribal charm shaped like a crescent moon, but she hadn't taken it with her. Why leave it behind? He looked inside the bag and found something strange. A silver orb, warm to the touch. It pulsed when he held it. Glowing faintly with a blue light, a message appeared on it in alien script. If you see this, I have failed to protect you. Run, hide. And don't trust the Valkyrie Council. They kill talebearers on sight. Jake dropped the orb, heart racing, talebearers again. That word, again. He went back inside and locked every door. Then checked the mirror again. The bump had grown slightly overnight, and now were tiny strands of fur beginning to appear. Fox-colored fur. He fell back onto the bed, breathing hard. What was happening to him? Later that evening, the house security panel blinked, motion detected near the perimeter. He rushed to the window, but it wasn't Shira. It was someone else, tall, armored. And wearing the symbol of the Valkyrie Council, Jake stepped back slowly. He was being hunted. But more than that, he was changing, and Shira was gone. Maybe to protect him, maybe to warn others, maybe to lead them away. All Jake knew now was that the girl who never looked him in the eye had seen something in him that terrified her. Something not quite human, something ancient. And now it was waking up. Jake didn't sleep. How could he? Shira was gone. A strange bump on his back was turning into something real. And the Valkyrie Council agent outside had searched the property before leaving in a patrol craft. They hadn't tried to enter, but they would be back. He could feel it. As the sun rose, Jake sat at the table staring at the silver orb she left behind. It pulsed again when he touched it, almost like a heartbeat. Then it projected an image, Shira's face, tired and frightened. If you are seeing this, then they know, her recorded voice whispered. You must understand the truth before they come. Jake leaned closer, heart pounding. My people were not always hunters. Her message continued. Long ago, the Volpuri lived beside another race. A hidden tribe with tails buried under skin. Tails that awakened with age or stress. Jake froze. They were called talebearers, Shira said. They had strange gifts. They could touch memories, calm storms, and bend time for a heartbeat. The image flickered, showing old paintings, rituals, stars. We feared them. And fear became violence. She whispered, we hunted them until none were left. Jake swallowed hard. But legends say one survived by mixing blood with humans, hiding among them, sleeping inside their children. Waiting for the right moment to awaken, Jake touched his lower back. Feeling the small fur-covered growth under his shirt, you are that awakening. Shira's message said, the council believes a talebearer will bring the end of their power, so they will destroy you without hesitation. The orb dimmed, then went silent. Jake sat back slowly, breathing hard. This couldn't be real. He was human, born on Earth, raised normally. No alien blood, no strange history. So how could this be true? His mind raced. Maybe Shira lied. Maybe it was a trick. Maybe she wanted him scared, dependent, confused. But then he remembered the nights she watched him sleep. The whispers, the claws drawn in fear, not anger. The trembling in her voice, she wasn't hunting him. She was protecting him. A soft knock at the door shattered the silence. Jake froze. He didn't move, didn't breathe. Another knock, but softer this time, like a signal. He stepped carefully toward the door and looked through the screen. Shira stood outside, hood down, hair tangled. Eyes tired, breathing fast. Jake unlocked the door and pulled her inside quickly. You shouldn't be here, he said, voice shaking. I know, she whispered. But I couldn't leave you alone. They moved to the back room where no windows showed light. Tell me everything, Jake said. No more secrets. Shira sat on the floor. Tail curled around her like a shield. Her voice was low and slow. My people believe the talebearers will return when the galaxies are out of balance, she explained. Their presence changes fate, changes history, changes destiny. She looked at him with fear and awe mixed together. That bump on your back, she continued. It is not a mutation. It is your true form waking up. Jake shook his head. How could I be one of them? I'm human. Shira stared at him a long moment. Then said softly, Are you certain? Jake opened his mouth, but no answer came. He didn't know his biological parents. He was adopted. His records were incomplete. He never wondered before, but now, everything felt different. Shira continued speaking, her voice trembling. The council has already scanned this sector, she said. They smelled your awakening. They will return soon. Jake leaned forward. What do they want with you? Shira looked down. If a Volpuri hides a talebearer, the punishment is death, she whispered. Not just for me, but for my whole bloodline. Jake felt a heavy pressure in his chest. She risked everything for him. Why didn't you report me? He asked quietly. Shira didn't look up. At first, she said nothing. Then her voice came small and fragile. Because when I watched you sleep, you looked peaceful. Jake blinked, and no talebearer in the old stories ever looked peaceful. She added, they looked angry, violent, powerful. Jake moved closer. I'm not dangerous, he said. Shira lifted her eyes. I'm not afraid of what you are, she whispered. I'm afraid of what they will do to you. The house lights flickered. A distant rumble filled the air. Shira's ears twitched. They've returned. She breathed. Jake stood up, heart pounding. What do we do? He asked. Shira grabbed his wrist. We run, she said, and we don't look back. The skies above the house turned red. Not natural red from sunset, but flashing pulses scanners from above. The council had returned, and this time, they were not searching quietly. They were hunting. Shira gripped Jake's hand tightly as they crawled into the narrow storage space under the floor. Dust filled their mouths, and the walls shook with each heavy step above. Jake could hear it, boots thudding, metal scraping. Alien voices speaking in code. "They're using scent tracers," Shira whispered, "looking for the tail scent on your back." Jake nodded silently, pressing closer to the ground. His heart felt like it would explode. He wasn't trained for this. He wasn't a soldier or a rebel. He was just a guy trying to live quietly. But now, he was something else, and they wanted him gone. Above them, a loud crash echoed. The front door had been kicked open. Sector 4 scanned. No visual contact. A voice said, deep and robotic. "Initiate particle sweep." Shira's claws dug slightly into Jake's arm. Her body trembled, not from fear, but from something older, some ancient instinct inside her waking up. She was ready to fight, but she also knew she might not win. Jake reached out and squeezed her hand back. He didn't speak, but his eyes said it all. "I won't let them take you either." A bright beam swept across the floorboards above them. It passed slowly, humming like a beast sniffing for prey. Then it paused, right above where they hid. Shira held her breath. Jake stopped moving completely. Then the light blinked and moved on. They waited a full minute in silence. No breath, no movement. Only then did Shira whisper, "We have one chance, through the back forest." They crawled out slowly, and Jake grabbed a small pack. Shira pulled her hood low over her head, wrapping her tail tightly to hide its color. They slipped through the back door and ran into the tall red grass. Behind them, the house burst with sound alarms triggered. Glass shattering, boots chasing. But the trees were thick here, full of twisted roots and old fog. This forest was sacred to the talebearers. Shira whispered as they ran. "It will help hide you." The deeper they went, the colder it became. Strange lights flickered through the trees, not from machines, but from the land itself. Jake felt something in his back twitch again. The tail was growing, slowly, painfully, but he could feel it sensing things, almost like it had instincts of its own. They reached a ridge, and Shira led him down into a deep hollow full of stone circles and glowing moss. "This is an anchor shrine," she said softly. "The stories say it awakens memory." Jake knelt by the stones, his body shaking. Then something strange happened. The ground pulsed once, and a flood of images hit his mind, not from now, but from something deep inside him. He saw a fox-tailed figure with silver hair, standing beside a young man who looked like him. She was protecting him from fire, from blades, from hunters. She looked just like Shira, but from long ago. Jake gasped, pulling away. "What did you see?" Shira asked. I think I've done this before," he whispered. "In another time or another life." Shira's eyes softened. But her ears twitched suddenly. Voices echoed nearby. They were closing in again. They had minutes, maybe less. Jake looked around, searching for a way to escape. But Shira grabbed his arm and said, "No more running." "What do you mean?" She stood tall, her tail uncoiling fully, glowing faintly now with blue and silver light. "If I keep running, they'll just keep hunting. And they'll never stop," she said. "So I'll protect you now, Shira." "No, you'll die," Jake whispered. She smiled sadly. "Maybe," she said. "But this is what my kind should have done long ago." She stepped forward, claws out, her robe fluttering behind her in the sacred wind. Jake's hand trembled. Then the tail on his back pulsed with light. He wasn't ready, but maybe he never would be. Still, he stood beside her, two of them, back to back. A fox girl and a man with a tail he didn't ask for, facing what came next, together. They didn't win the fight, they survived it. That was enough. The Vulbary hunters attacked hard with energy nets and pulse blades. Shira fought like a storm, fast, sharp, and fearless. But there were too many. She bought just enough time for Jake to grab her and dive into the deep woods. Now they ran. Branches cut across their skin. Roots grabbed their feet, and glowing insects scattered in panic. But Jake didn't stop. He carried Shira on his back when her legs gave out. Her breathing was shallow, her hood gone, her hair tangled with dirt and leaves. Behind them, red lights still moved through the trees. The hunters were tracking his body heat, but the forest was thick, old. And strange, it played tricks on machines. This part of the forest, Shira whispered weakly. It remembers. Remembers what? Jake asked. Still running. Tailbearer blood, she said. It's sacred here. As he ran deeper, the air changed. It grew colder, heavier, but also quieter, like even the birds were holding their breath. The trees glowed faintly blue now, with symbols carved into their bark. Circles, tails, stars, spirals. Jake had never seen anything like it. He found a cave ahead, hidden behind thick moss and vines. Inside, it was dry and silent. With walls smooth like crystal, he laid Shira down gently. Checked her wounds, shallow but bleeding. I'm sorry, he whispered. You got hurt because of me. She shook her head slowly. I chose to stand beside you, she said softly. No regret. Jake touched the cave wall and felt warmth. Then something inside him moved. Then pulsed, the walls responded. Glowing with soft light, symbols on the rock shimmered to life, casting shadows that danced across Shira's face. This place accepts you, she whispered, amazed. It's a sanctuary. It's reacting to your blood. Jake sat down, breathing hard. He looked at his lower back, and for the first time, he saw it. A tail, not fully grown, but real, covered in soft golden fur. I'm changing, he said. Voice low, every day it grows more. Shira reached out slowly and touched it. Her hand didn't tremble this time. You're not becoming something new, she said. You're becoming what you always were. Jake looked at her. She smiled weakly, but her eyes were proud. They told us talebearers were monsters, she said. But you risked everything to carry me. To protect me, Jake helped her sit up and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Outside, the red lights had stopped moving. Either the forest confused their tech, or something scared them away. We're safe for now, Jake whispered. Shira leaned against the wall, her voice faint. I think this is a shrine, she said. An old one. What does it do? Jake asked. Some say the ancient talebearers built these places to store their memories, she said. To guide future generations, Jake walked toward the center of the chamber. There stood a stone pedestal with a strange symbol, the same crescent moon shape Shira always wore around her neck. He placed his hand on it, and light burst outward like water. Visions filled the cave, swirling stars, fox-tailed figures in robes, flames falling from the sky, and then figures standing back to back, one human, one Vulperi, both glowing with tails behind them. Shira gasped. It's us, she whispered. We were meant to find each other. The light faded. Silence returned. Jake stepped back slowly, mind spinning. Why me, he asked. Why here? Why now? Shira looked at him with something deep in her eyes. Not fear, not duty, but trust. Because you're not just human, she said. You're the bridge. Jake sat beside her, the tail resting across his lap, warm and alive. The hunters would return. The council would send more. But now, he had more than fear. He had purpose. He had someone beside him who saw the truth. And didn't run this time. She reached out and held his hand. You don't have to fight alone, she whispered. Not anymore. The forest listened. The old shrine pulsed gently, as if remembering something long buried, something that had finally returned. Morning light barely reached the forest floor, but something colder than night now crept through the trees. The Vulperi hunters had returned, and this time they were not scanning or searching. They were here to kill. Jake stood just outside the cave entrance, body tense, his half-grown tail flicked behind him, alert and alive. He felt it now not just as part of his body, but as part of something greater. His blood, his breath, even his thoughts felt. Louder, sharper. Something inside was waking fully behind him. She-Ra leaned against the cave wall, still weak, but steady. Her robe was torn, her tail bandaged, but her eyes had never burned brighter. "They're close," she said softly. Jake nodded. "I can hear them too," he whispered. Every step she looked at him, surprised. "That's your tail's instinct," she said. "It's growing fast." Jake turned toward the forest again. "They'll find us in minutes." She-Ra walked forward slowly, standing beside him, her claws extended. Her teeth slightly bared, but it wasn't fear in her eyes. It was something else, claiming, protecting, warning. "I won't let them take you," she said quietly. Jake shook his head. "I'm not letting them take you either." A voice echoed through the forest, cold and sharp. "Tailbearer, step forward, and we will make your death clean." Jake stepped out into the clearing. "No," he shouted. "I won't run." The trees parted as 3 armored hunters appeared. Tall and dark, with weapons glowing red. "Then bleed," the leader said, raising his blade, but before he could strike, a blur of silver shot through the air. She-Ra, claws out, teeth bared, slammed into the hunter from the side. They rolled across the ground, crashing into roots and stones. Jake moved without thinking. His tail lit up, glowing brighter than ever before. And for the first time, time slowed. He could see everything: the hunter's blade, the arc of motion, She-Ra's heartbeat. He moved forward, caught the weapon mid-air, and twisted. The energy blade broke apart in his hands. He felt no pain, only purpose. The other 2 hunters charged. Jake raised his hand, and the air shimmered. A pulse spread out like a wave. The attackers froze in place, eyes wide, weapons stalled. They dropped to their knees. Stunned, disoriented, the forest responded. Roots twisted up from the ground and wrapped around their legs like snakes, holding them still. She-Ra stared at Jake, eyes wide. "You're fully awake," she whispered. "You are the last tailbearer." Jake looked down at his glowing tail, golden, alive, warm. "I don't want to hurt anyone," he said quietly. She-Ra stepped closer. "You didn't hurt them," she said. "You showed them mercy. That's what makes you different." The leader groaned, trying to rise again. She-Ra walked to him, placed a claw under his chin. "You came to take what belongs to no one but me," she hissed. "He is under my protection now." She looked up at Jake. "And I am under his." Jake raised his hand one more time. This time, he didn't strike. He touched the hunter's mind with just a thought. He erased their memory of the shrine, the fight, even the tale. When the hunters woke hours later in the outer woods, they would remember nothing. Back in the cave, the light dimmed again. Jake helped She-Ra sit on a mossy stone. "Is it over?" she asked softly. Jake looked out toward the trees. "No," he said. "But we've bought time." She leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. "You're not my roommate anymore," she said quietly. Jake smiled. "Then what am I?" She looked up at him with a slow, shy smile. "You're my future," she whispered. They sat together as the forest pulsed around them, old spirits watching, old powers returning. The last tailbearer had found his path, and the fox girl who once feared him now stood proudly by his side. Whatever came next, they would face it together.